Okay, thank you. I will be talking on the stock of Anchovy in the Gulf of Cadiz, how we did an implementation of the Bayesian approach for this stock. The stock is located in here, in the southwest of Spain. And in the last year, there has been a lot, it's an important stock in terms of economy and the societal consequences of the fisheries. To such an extent that the stock has become increasingly appearing in the newspaper as a conflictive issue, as a stock that leads to societal conflicts. The area, the southwest Spain, the area where the stock is located, is this area. As you can see, this is, by the way, the only place in the Iberian Peninsula that has a white shelf. As you can see here, it's, this is chlorophyll, it's high productive, and somehow the anchovy is using this high productive ecosystem to develop the stock. The transition from, one of the problems with this stock is that the transition from one year to the next year, the fishing effort is so huge that basically there is no adult going from one year to the next year. So the whole of the population needs to be transferred from one year to the next year, relying on the early stages. And these early stages, as we all know, are very vulnerable to the environmental conditions. And in this case, in this area, the life cycle of this species is occupying different habitats that has a lot of environmental noise. You can see, for instance, in this image, that the area, this is the Guadalquivir River, which is the largest river in the southern Iberian Peninsula, and you can see the impact of turbidity plume. So somehow the shelf and the estuary, they are highly connected, and they are configuring an ecosystem who has a lot of environmental variability. We can see in detail how the life cycle develops in the different habitats. Basically, the adults spawn some close to the slope in the inner side of the shelf, and then larvae, and particularly juveniles, tend to approach the coastal zone, and a large portion of the population also occupies the inside of the estuary as a nursery habitat until they have a certain size, and when they have a certain size, they abandon this protective environment and they move into the shelf, and they are fished in that area. So basically, they are occupying, the whole life cycle is occupying the shelf and the estuarine zone. And both of these environments are highly variable in terms of the changing environmental conditions. You can see here, for instance, this is an estimate of the juvenile abundance within the estuary as a function of discharges in the estuary. In Spain, particularly in the south of Spain, every drop of fresh water is regulated. Everything is damp and everything is controlled. So the inflow of fresh water into this estuary is regulated basically by agriculture. And it's having a strong influence on the abundance of juveniles that we have in the estuary. So therefore, this regulation is interfering with the life cycle and with the stock abundance. And in addition, this is fine, and you can see here, these are environmental records in the estuary, discharges, salinity, oxygen, turbidity. As you can see, it's highly noisy over the time. So this somehow is interfering too with the stock dynamics, and it's quite noisy. In addition, this is what is happening somehow in the interior of the estuary and nearby the estuary. But once they are in the shelf, and particularly very early life stages like eggs and larvae, they are subject to the influence of wind and the effect of wind on the currents. This is the area. What I'm showing here, and it will be a movie, is currents in the ocean. And these two signals are meteorological stations, and you will see the signal of wind. Remember that this is the area where the stock is spawning. So if I am able to do the movie, you can see the wind, and then you will see what we call levantes, which is a very strong easterly wind. You can see that here. When these easterlies are particularly frequent at the time of spawning. So when we know that you can see that in the currents, that when there is a strong easterly, there is a strong westward current, and we know about other oceanographic studies that this eastward current can take eggs and larvae, not eggs and larvae. We don't have the proof of that, but we know by satellite images that this current can move along the southern Iberian coast up to the open ocean. And we expect, and we do have a proof for that, that has a devastating effect on the spawning of these species. And this is an example. These two figures, the difference, you can see here, this is larvae abundance occupying this nice environment because it's highly productive. The currents usually are not high if you don't have a strong easterly wind. And the only difference between these two pictures are about 3 days. In this case, we didn't have one of these easterly events. And in this case, after 2 days of these strong easterly winds, you can see the center of mass of this spawning patch moving to the west. And we don't have data for the next successive day, but we expect this patch of spawning has been lost, totally lost, moving into the open Atlantic. So, if we think in the life cycle of this species, and how the different elements of the different components of the life cycle are occupying the different habitats, and the strong environmental variability that each of these habitats has, it's not strange that we have a conflict because of there is a lot of environmental noise in here, but the way this stock is regulated is through a rather constant TAC. And this is just the opposite to what the stock, the value of the stock is. I mean, we can see here the landing over the different years and how the TAC is quite permanent. So this combination of a very noisy stock forced by the environmental variations with a permanent TAC makes an arena quite favorable for the conflict. So what we did in ECOKNOWS, because all this is ECOKNOWS work, as we work, Samu explained yesterday the basis of the GPDM. So we implemented a modification of the GPDM. Basically what we did was to modify the recruitment, and rather than the Beverton-Hall standard equation in the GPDM, we implemented a recruitment model which has a dual resolution, weekly and monthly. And we implement there the forcing of temperature, wind, and discharges of the river. We need to work with dual resolution because of, as you can see, you have seen in the previous figure, some of the environmental variations work on a time scales of days or weeks. And we have the information, the environmental information at that time scale. But we cannot run the whole model, the whole Bayesian model, at time scale of weeks because it's completely inefficient in computational terms. So we developed a way to embed this environmental variability, which has a time scale of days and weeks. We did a mathematical tool to be able to embed this information that we have into a model that is overall running in a monthly time scale. This is somehow part of the work. This is what we did. We modified the Beverton-Hall equation, and it's implemented at the early stages, and then from this place forward, everything is the same, like the GPDM, with working with a natural and fishing mortality. This is what I meant before. part of the life cycle, we know it's forced at a time scale of days, weeks, and part of the life cycle is forced at a monthly time scale. So we implemented all this. This is what is, if you are interested in the mathematical details, we can provide that to you, and it's already under review, to embed somehow these time scales into a model that is running on a longer time scale. One of the elements that was mentioned yesterday that has a lot of power in Bayesian approach is that you can mix your understanding on the processes with the data that you have available for your system. And we did that by incorporating capture uni effort, that we have some estimations in the time series, and also in the way that in the standard way that GPDM does, which is making catches dependent, mortality dependent on the fishing mortality depending on the catches. We had, I must say, and Samu told it yesterday, that we have a set of problems with convergence in some parameters. It's not the convergence in this complex exercise is not easy, so convergence and computational time is part of the problem we have to face. But if we look at the output, the recruits, it make sense. I mean, the numbers that we are obtaining with this approach are reasonable. And if we compare the model output, which are the lines in here, with the monthly catches, which are the bars, we have a feeling that the consistency, the internal consistency of the exercise seems to be good, because of we have a signal from the model which is not, this, it makes sense when you compare this signal with the available data. But this, on the other hand, this is not strange, because as I said, I've just said, catches are data that are part of the overall model. So in fact, this is not a validation exercise. This is a checking of the internal coherence of the approach, because these data are part of the whole exercise. But what is interesting is that if we make this exercise beyond the data that has been in contact with the model, we still find that the model is not doing a bad job. And once we compare one model output with data that have no contact with the model, this is not coherence, this is validation. And this is this figure, and you can see the line is the model output, and the bars are estimations of the juvenile abundance. We have a program that makes monthly samplings of the juveniles abundant within the estuary, and this data have not been included into the data, into the joint process plus data that makes the whole of the Bayesian approach. So somehow this is it was quite a challenging exercise for the model. Also, there are things that I don't like this shift in time. But the overall, if I look at the overall, I'm not unhappy with the model output. We also did some forecasting, because the key issue here in terms of management is that because of the critical effect of the environment on the stock is basically on the early life stages, if we know in advance, and we will know what the environment has been, we have something like a forecasting, a predicting capacity 3, 4, or 5 months ahead the fishery season has started. So we have in advance some taste of whether or not the stock will be doing well in the next 4 or 5 months, because the meteorological conditions that define this has already been realized. And somehow we can make use of this knowledge in advance to project, and that has been said in previous talk, that it's not only the ecosystem. It's not only the natural science which is of interest in our work, when we work with Shanghai socio-ecological system. When we met the stakeholders, when we met the fishermen community, basically they told us, we know this is quite a noisy fishery. It's not depending on us, it's the environment. We have no control, no governmental agency will have any control on the environment. So what we need is somehow to develop a management tools that, provided that this is happening, that we have this very noisy signal, somehow we got a more stable revenue. And how is our academic so far exercise? I encourage you to see this talk that we also develop in ECOKNOWS, so you can see how to proceed. Thank you.